Hello everyone, welcome to a dreary day in Nova Scotia. We had kind of a snowstorm yesterday. Most of it's gone today. You can see some remnants out there, I think. But you know, what better day than a dreary cold winter day than to talk about tomatoes. So I haven't really done a wrap up of the 2021 garden, which I think I will do, but tomatoes, you know, dahlias and tomatoes deserve their own videos. So today is tomatoes. I've got my notes here, my notes and my plot plan from this year so I can remember what I grew. And let's start talking tomatoes. So maybe the first ones that we'll talk about is the paste tomatoes. So this year I grew Amish paste, Opalka, and San Marzano. I had grown all of them before. This was the second time I think that I had tried the Amish paste, and the second time for Opalkas as well. San Marzanos I've grown for quite a few years now, and like, you have great timing. Yeah, you do. Sorry about that, my little furry helper decided to adjust the tripod for me. So we were talking paste tomatoes. So San Marzanos are like my old faithful. They're smaller than the other two kinds of paste tomatoes that I grew, but they are far more standard. I had less issues with cracking. Like Amish paste, they were the largest of the three, but I don't think I'll grow them again. The amount of cracking that I had on them, like they weren't even ripe and they were starting to crack. So I'm not saying I'm never gonna grow them again, but I think next year, and I think overall a trend that I'm going to do next year is focus on like the staples and the tried and true things. So I may grow some Opalkas. I don't think I'll grow any Amish paste, and I'll be focusing my paste tomatoes on San Marzano. That being said, I also think like half the tomatoes I grow next year are going to be paste. By far, they are the ones that we use the most. I think I grew, let's see, I grew about 20 to 24 different tomato plants this year. Not necessarily different, but 20 to 24 plants. And I think 15 is probably lots. There's only 2 of us. We can only eat so many tomato sandwiches. And we do make a lot of salsa, and I'd like to get into making more sauces and things like that. So I think next year, San Marzanos will be, you know, half the garden. That being said, let's move on to the rest. So I'll separate out, actually maybe we'll talk about the cherry tomatoes first. So Tasty Treat is a hybrid. It's Jarrett's favorite. It's a classic red cherry tomato. It's really good. We grew one of those. We also grew Sun Sugar, which is like a yellow or orange. It's more of an orange cherry tomato, I guess. And it's kind of like an open pollinated version of Sun Gold, which is another really popular hybrid cherry tomato. And we also grew a chocolate cherry tomato, which I received the seeds in the Great Canadian Seed Challenge swap. So I did grow one of those and enjoyed it as well. I think I also grew some Dancing with Smurfs for my parents, and an Isis and a Sunrise Bumblebee. Those I gave away. I think I decided last year we grew 5 cherry tomatoes and that was too many, so this year we grew 3. That's still too many. Like, cherry tomatoes are prolific, and I get cherry tomatoed out quite easily. So I think, you know, no more than 2 next year, and maybe only 1. But we'll see. There's always some new variety that I'm dying to try, and maybe I'll change my mind. But if we grow 2, I will grow Lola. If we grow 2, I will grow 1 tasty treat and 1 sun sugar. Lola, can you do that later? As soon as I start talking, she's gonna start. Okay, I had to bribe my dog with peanut butter to be quiet for 5 minutes. So I will try to be quick. I'll keep the red tomatoes and the colored tomatoes separate. So I ended up growing Scotia, Starfire, and triple L crop here. I also started some other ones that I ended up either growing for my parents or that I ended up just giving away because I didn't have space. Those included Bonnie Best, Abe Lincoln, and German Johnson. And I also grew, because I thought it was a red tomato, Paul Robeson, but it turns out it is actually not a red tomato. I'll include it in this category though, because it's where I thought it belonged when I made my plant. So Scotia and Starfire are both determinant tomatoes. They are both medium-sized and, you know, your classic kind of medium-sized round red tomato. They both grow really well here. A lot of people around where I live grow that type of tomato because we have a shorter growing season than certainly a lot of the people in the United States have. We're a Canadian Zone 5 here, and that's like a 4 in the USDA. So it's a tomato, and I mean, Scotia being its name, it was developed in Nova Scotia for, you know, our conditions. So of course it grows well here. And I would grow either or both of those again. Actually, I think I received the Scotia tomato seeds also as part of the Canadian Seed Challenge. And I would grow those again. And I didn't have a preference. The Scotia and the Starfire, you know, they were equally productive, around the same size. I would grow either again. The Paul Robeson and the triple L crop are both indeterminate varieties, and they are larger tomatoes. Like I would probably call them both a beefsteak type tomato. The Paul Robeson was actually the first ripe tomato that I picked, like that wasn't a cherry tomato. It even beat the determinate tomatoes, which was shocking. And I think they were my favorite flavored tomato. So Paul Robeson is going to be a standard, I think. I think it will be one that we continue to grow every year. The triple crop was also, you know, a very good tomato. I think, I don't know if I'm mixing it up with one of the other tomatoes, but I think it actually, it didn't look red like a tomato. Like it looked like it could have some pink in it, but maybe I was mixing it up with one of the others. And I think I would grow it again as well. So as for the color tomatoes that I grew for yellow tomatoes, I grew Dr. Weish's and Kellogg's Breakfast. I grew one of each, and actually I think it was the Dr. Weish's that in my tomato planting video in the spring I had snapped the stem but left it just to see if it would take, and it did, and it, you know, with no ill effects. It wasn't behind any of the other tomatoes. It caught up, it grew. But I think Jarrett has discovered that he likes the yellow tomatoes. They're less acidic, and I think, you know, we only grew 2 yellow tomatoes this year, but I think of the slicing tomatoes that, you know, make up half of our tomato bed next year, I think maybe half of those will be yellow tomatoes. So probably both of those will stay on the grow list. I started Cherokee Purple because I was on my quest this year to discover what the best purple or black tomato was, which I've now decided is Paul Robeson. But at the time I didn't know this is the category it belonged in. But the Cherokee Purple that I started, the seedling actually died, so I didn't actually get to grow it this year. I also grew Black from Tula, and I don't know, it was the only tomato plant I had this year that suffered. I don't know if it was stink bug, but the fruit was definitely affected by something. There were circle marks that looked similar to stink bug. We actually had a huge stink bug problem last year, and I had a hard time keeping them off my tomatoes. This year, that's the only plant that I saw affected. I saw maybe 2 stink bugs all summer. So we didn't actually end up eating any tomatoes from that plant. Like every tomato was affected. So I don't know if now that I know I love Paul Robeson, I don't know if I'll bother next year. Maybe I will. But it's not a must grow for me right now. Black Crim was about the only purple tomato that actually I had success with. And you know, it's a good tomato. Unless there's something new and great that I want to try in its place, it will probably get a spot next year. Great White Blues was a tomato that I grew for the first time this year. I had wanted to grow it. It was developed in Canada. I think it was in Manitoba maybe where it was developed. And it was kind of like, it's kind of a white tomato with purple shoulders, which sounded cool at the time. I don't think I'll grow it again. I had a really hard time trying to determine when it was ripe. And it didn't seem to soften with ripeness like a lot of other, you know, unusually colored tomatoes. It seemed to stay hard for a long, long time. And it wasn't my favorite. So, you know, why grow something that's hard when it's not even your favorite? So I think it's on the axe list. I don't think I'll grow it again next year. And the last tomato that I grew was German Pink. I have grown it before, I think, or similar. Like, it's a beefsteak pink tomato, and I tend to like the pink ones. And it was, I would grow it again next year. So that was the 2021 tomato season. Overall, like I probably will have thrown up some photos throughout this whole thing, but overall it was a pretty successful tomato year. We had an extremely long season this year. We had at least an extra month than we usually have before we had a frost. And had I known that, I would not have, one of the things that I do here is top my tomato plants. And that usually is an early signal to indeterminate tomatoes here to ripen the fruit that they have and stop it from developing more, so it will put all of its energy into the fruit that it's already started growing. And we usually need to do that here in order to get fruit ripened on the vine before frost, but I had an awful lot ripen on the vine this year. So that was fun. And not that I'm not hoping for climate change by any stretch, but if we have another fall like this one next year, you won't hear me complaining about it. So if you have any suggestions for next year, I'm open to suggestions. I like trying different tomatoes every year. I like discovering new ones. I probably won't have very many spots for experimental tomatoes next year, but I'll always find a spot for a few. So let me know what ones I must grow, and thanks for watching.